Hi everyone, my name is Yang Zhuji, and I'm so grateful that you still decide to come here after a long Raven day. And I'm a senior product manager from AWS DRS. Today, I'm thrilled to talk to you something every organization care deeply about, but often underestimate until it's too late: disaster recovery. And I will show you how AWS makes disaster recovery simple, cost-effective, resilient, with AWS Elastic Disaster Recovery Service, or we call it AWS DRS. This is today's agenda. I will start with some talk about the importance of DR with the real-life examples, how to choose the right DR solution based on your use case, and how does AWS DRS work. More important, we will go beyond the basics, talk about the advanced features, and share you more. Let's look at some compelling business cases for resilience, starting with the real cost of the downtime. And then we discuss why acting now makes more sense than ever before. Let's start with a concrete example. A global community company, and they lost 8.2 million in revenue due to an outage. To be noted, this is not it's pure the revenue loss, not even counting the reputational damage and the customer trust. And this is not a single instance. A leading U.S. airline lost 115 million in profit due to an outage. And these are two examples, but we have more data that's showing that, for example, IDC report among the Fortune 1000 company, the application downtime cost can be $500K to $1 million per year. And 76% of the company had an outage in the past 2 years. So 76%, that's more than half. So that's the problem. Now let's look at why acting now makes business sense. We have the customer, they already realize having the resilience strategy is so important, and they already implement in their system. For this customer, they already observe 12 to 20% increase in the profit margin. So making the DR solution isn't just about avoid the loss, but also it can the competitive advantage for you because it protects your bottom line. And the question isn't whether you should have the disaster recovery, it's whether you can afford not to. So before we dive into the DR solution, we need to establish two critical metrics that help you to make a decision what DR strategy you need. RPO and RTO. The RPO, or we call it a recovery point objective, it answers the question, how much data can you afford to lose? Can you lose the data in past 1 hour? Can you lose the data in past the day? So it's measured in time. And then RTO, or we call it a recovery time objective, it asks how quickly you want your service or your application back to the work. And what's the impact of every minute or every hour to your business? And then we also use the number we saw earlier, let's say 500K to 1 million loss in downtime for those 100 Fortune company. So it means every minute counts. Now, we know what is RPO and RTO. We can use that metrics to choose what strategy you want to use. We will start with the fundamental of resilience strategy backup. This means that you make the copy of your data and you can restore it in case any loss or corruption happens. For backup, the RPO can be hours, and the RTO also ours. And it's the most cost-effective approach from these three strategies. And the middle layer will be what we will focus today, the disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is about return to the operations, not just to restore your data. And you can set up a specific targets when the highly impacted application, like there's a failure happen. And the metrics improve significantly because the RPO is reduced to seconds, RTO can be minutes, and the cost is moderate investment for you. Finally, we have the high availability. This is the premium tier, and it provides the resistance to the common failures through the design and the operational mechanisms. And the RPO is near real time, and the RTO also near real time. And this is the significant investment that for your most critical application, if you want to protect, then you go to the high availability. Okay, after knowing the strategies, let's look at what disaster recovery solution AWS offer. AWS DRS is an agent-based replication service. So when we say agent-based, it enables the high-performance capability because it can distinguish the snapshot-based model. It can continuously replicate your data and give you the data protection. That's why it can reduce the RPO to seconds. You can the way how you get started with AWS DRS, you can install a lightweight AWS replication server on your source server. So your source server can be the EC2 instance on AWS. It can be on-premises servers, VMware, Hyper-V, or even the other cloud-hosted instance. And then once this agent is installed, it will run in the background and continuously replicate the block level data of your source server to a lightweight staging area within AWS. You can specify what region you want it to replicate the data to. This way, when a disaster strikes, your data on AWS is only seconds behind your primary site. Okay, so you finish the setup, and AWS DRS allowed you to run some drill or testing to see if this DR is actually working, right? You don't want to wait until the disaster happens and then testify it's working. So you can easy test on AWS. And when the event of disaster happens, let's say you have an outage or you have the cyber attack, hardware failure, and you can quickly launch a recovery instance in AWS. So this recovery process, we call it a failover. It's been a fully provisioned EC2 instance, which maps from your source server on AWS, and also it's linked to your replicated data. And your server apps or database running on your primary site now can link to AWS, and it can be ready to serve your traffic. When your disaster is solved on your primary site, that's the time you want to come back to that site from AWS. We call that process failback. You can fail back to your primary site when you are anytime you are ready. Just don't forget to terminate the instance from AWS to save your cost for to avoid the future expense. There are many benefits to use the AWS DRS service. Besides the RPO and RTO we talked about, it also has lower cost because the replication isn't one-on-one. We use a very low-cost staging area in AWS to replicate your data continuously. And there's no third-party licensing fee or other fees we manage all this process for you, and it avoids the manual setup. So it's highly automated, because when we do the conversion of your primary site server to AWS, we also copy your configuration from your server. For example, it converted disk, it launched the correct instance type, also it create your recovery network. What's more, so it's support the PIT snapshot, point in time. That means you can fill over to the most recent data set, or you can choose what is the time point you want to recover to. So in a case of the ransomware, the older points in your snapshot can be used as your recovery point. It's very easy to test. You can run a drill with one click on DRS console. It also supports a network setting. If your source server is in AWS, you can easily copy your source network infrastructure, and you can include your security group or capture any ports or route changes. Data banking means like by configuring the DRS with the service control policy, there is a specific account you can use, and to make sure that when there's some certificated attack happened, or someone actively trying to delete your data, you can have a very clean environment and make sure the data is isolated from this attack. Now we can look at some details from the architecture-wise, how the DR work and how you can apply this to your application. So there are 4 DR patterns. So all these 4 DR patterns, it has the same destination, which is the AWS cloud. For the source server, it can be your on-premises servers. It can be from the other clouds, or if you're already on AWS, you can still set up a DR. You can do the DR from one region to another, from one availability zone to another availability zone. So we will dive into details for if you want to recover from on-premises or from other cloud to AWS. This is the architecture. From the left side, you can see that you have some servers from your on-premises, and then you can install this AWS replication agent to each of this server. And once you install this server, it will automatically and continuously running and replicate your data to a lightweight staging area on AWS. One replication server can serve up to 15 servers. And we make sure that this replication is on parallel, and it will make sure the high performance of the replication. When there is like disaster happen, like we said, cyber attack or hardware failure, and there will be a recovery area, like it will be set up, and all your server will be spun up with the mapping AWS EC2 instance, and there will be the EBS attached to it. So for the replication server, it does a few things. One thing is like it sends up the replication status to AWS DRS, so you can easily check the status of the current replication. And for DRS, it can automatically create and terminate this replication, so you can have the full control of this process with the console, and you can get the health updates and other status in one place. When the recovery instance is already set up, your like application running successfully, and you solve your problem from your primary site, you can launch a fallback, and then the agent control protocol will allow you to have this traffic coming back to your primary site. When you have the DR set up on the AWS, have a from region to region DR, it's very similar workflow, but the data replication, it can leverage the native AWS services, including the S3 cross-region replication. For DRS, there is a EC2 to EC2 transfer. So that means the data transfer is more performance, and it can efficiently build this AWS backbone, and it has minimal latency, and because the both source server and the target server is on AWS. But the whole workflow is exactly the same. It's just like more performant. So you might be curious at this point, how do we charge for this service if it's fully managed and automatic for your DR use case? We have 3 tiers of charging. So for the service itself, we have the flight rate charging for $20 per month per server. And for the staging area, which is continually replicate your source server to AWS, we have the charge for the minimum of EC2 and EBS usage based on what's your data volume and what's the EC2 instance will be used. And when there is a drill or disaster happen, we have the temporary failover cost, which is the EC2 instance will be like mapping to your source server. And this will be the temporary. Once you recover from the disaster, the charge will be terminated. All right, now we know all the core function and the offering from DRS. I will introduce this advanced feature and can be beneficial to you and simplify your workflow. It's called post-launch actions. The post-launch action is a framework. It can automatically execute your predefined or customized actions by launching recovery instances. So like it can enable some automatic validation, configuration, or testing task that you can define in a script. Previously, you might need to manually do a lot of work once the instance is launched. But now it can fully managed by this predefined action. And also, we offer the systems manager integration. So this feature, it leveraged the system manager documents, and you can run the commands, and you can automate the scripts to on the recovered instance, and your administrator can create some actions, the task like connectivity checks, permission validation, and also the framework, it can reduce the complexity and the human error in the disaster, the whole process. If you want to know more information or step-by-step how to set up a DRS, there are some blogs. Feel free to scan the QR code. We have the details about how to do the cross-region disaster recovery, how to do the cross-account disaster recovery, and also like from the different source server, like other cloud or on-premises, we'll have all this here. All right, thank you for attending this session, and we'll appreciate if you can fill up this survey on your app. Thank you.